Hey everyone, this is a review of Ego's 880 CFM cordless blower. It runs on any of their 56-volt batteries. I'm going to cover what I like about this thing, what I don't like about it, some differences from the older blowers, and we're going to look at performance. All right, let's talk performance on this. This thing is an amazingly powerful blower. I took it out and blew some wet leaves around. This is right after a rainstorm. The ground was still soft and squishy, so these leaves were definitely still wet, and it had no problem blowing them through grass, which is just about the hardest thing you can ask of a leaf blower. It also has no problem moving around dry leaves. These ones started matted down in my grass. This is after the winter. They had fallen after I did the main part of my leaf cleanup, and these were down in the grass and had to be knocked free, and this had no problem doing that. And once they're piled up, they move around like nothing. It's absolutely super easy to blow dry leaves around through grass with this. I've also used this for snow removal. We had 2 to 3 inches of dry, powdery snow when it was really cold, and this handled my whole driveway and blowing off my car with no issues. And this is actually faster than getting out a snowblower and doing that for the right kind of snow. Now, if you have a thick, heavy, wet snow, this is going to be useless against that, but with dry, powdery snows, this thing is awesome. One common question I get on my other Ego blower reviews is, can this thing dry off a car? And yes, absolutely. You can see how it handles water here. It just blows these puddles right out of the way. It can blow the water uphill. This is a very powerful blower that can definitely handle blowing off a car. And just for fun, I put some gravel down on pavement to see how this could handle it. And for just scattered gravel, it does pretty good at moving that. It's really a testament to how much wind force is coming out of this nozzle. Now, if you have a whole bunch of gravel, obviously you want a bristle brush or a paddle broom to do that with. But for just a little bit, this blower works great. All right, let's look at features on this thing. It's got the standard variable speed trigger down here and a turbo button, and then you've got your speed control lock-on. That is very different from previous Ego blowers that just had a dial right here. The 650 and 765 both had that, and you could just change your speed, your cruise control using that dial. This one, you've got to look at the screen, and it's a little bit more finicky. This is actually one of the things that I really don't like about this blower. So we turn it on, you've got your battery status. I like that. You don't have to look at the back of the blower to see the corresponding battery charge amount. Now, each of these bars, you can hit this lock button while you have it there, and it'll keep it at that speed. The only problem is it's very hard to get the bars at the level you want. See, I tried 3 bars on that one, and it dropped to 2. I find that really annoying. It's not consistent, and I'm doing this on a workbench. It's even harder when you're holding it like this, trying to keep that variable speed trigger where you want it and hitting this with your thumb all at once. It's a pain. I wish they had not put the cruise control here. I wish it was another dial. That's the thing I really don't like about this blower. Everything else I love. Now, with any Ego product, and I really like this, anything you're supposed to interact with is in bright green. You've got your turbo, you've got your speed control, lock on, you've got your trigger, you've got your battery release back here, and then you've got your tube release right here. All right, now I've got the 650, so we can compare these side by side. Some of the things they did with these to get more power out of the 880 is they've added more intake area, and the 765 had something similar to this too. The 650 is just straight in the back here. On the 880, you've got a side intake as well as straight in the back. Another thing, if you'll notice, when you look at the blower tubes on these, the 880 has a much larger diameter, consistent throughout the whole thing. But this is good for accessories. If you want to swap these, they are interchangeable. So if you're doing something like using the gutter cleaning attachment, you can still use that with this blower. Something else that's nice with this blower, this is the first Ego blower I've had that came with a shoulder strap. Take this end and click it in right here on this hook. And if you're right-handed, it works really well. If you're left-handed, you're out of luck because there's not an attachment point on this side. So what that looks like in practical use, you've got the strap over your shoulder, and this just holds it right at your hip, so you can use it and swing it back and forth without having to support it with the arm that you're controlling it with. Let's talk runtime. I did some tests with a 5 amp hour battery, and that's just what I did my test with all of the other models of Ego blowers with, so I stuck with that for this one. If you want to look at the 4 amp hour kitted battery, I also did a turbo test for both of those, and as expected, it scales linearly. For the 4 amp hour, when you're moving to the 5 amp hour, you just get 25% more runtime, pretty much exactly. So for a 5 amp hour battery on low, this gets 55.5 minutes, and then for the same battery on turbo, it gets 12.4 minutes of runtime. Now, if you look at this graph, it's very obvious this blower, the 880 CFM, is much less efficient on low than all the other blowers that Ego makes. But if you look at turbo, this actually has a higher runtime on a 5 amp hour battery than the less powerful 765 CFM blower. That's pretty much amazing. So what Ego did for this blower is they optimized it to run at its most powerful. On high and turbo, it's gonna do better. Which is a good thing for me because I pretty much just smash the turbo button all the time when I'm using my leaf blowers. Now, to offset that, what I think Ego decided is instead of using a 5 amp hour battery in the kit, they have 2 4 amp hour batteries, so you get 8 amp hours total, which allows you, if you're running on low, to charge one pretty much all the way up. If you're getting 45 minutes per battery charge on low, you can pretty much charge the whole battery in that amount of time, and then you're ready to swap out and keep going. So what they did is they allowed you to charge one while using it and allowed that as an acceptable trade-off for lower performance and efficiency on low speeds. When you scale it up for runtime on the kitted battery, you're getting almost 20 minutes of runtime compared to the 12.5 or less for the 765. And just to note, the 880 CFM blower is outputting 700 CFM on high. That's more than turbo on everything else except for the 765 CFM blower. Now, one thing to note, because it does pull so much power on turbo, Ego tells you it limits, if you're using less than a 4 amp hour battery, so a 2.5 amp hour or a 2 amp hour battery, it will limit it to half power. So you only get 2 out of those 4 bars, and you can't do turbo when you're running with a smaller battery, and that's to protect those batteries from overheating and prematurely dying. Now, since this blower does draw so much current on turbo, for both a 4 amp hour and a 5 amp hour battery, if you run this consistently on turbo the whole time, when those are empty and they come off the blower, they will be too hot to charge immediately. Luckily, Ego's chargers will wait until they've cooled down enough so they don't damage the battery by charging it hot, but you will have to wait for that to cool down for it to start charging. Now, performance-wise, I also looked at the wind force coming out of the nozzle of these. I stuck it face down, pointing right at a scale, and turned it on turbo, and this is using a 5 amp hour battery for everything, and you can see by far the 880 CFM has the best performance and the most force coming out of that nozzle. You have all the way up to 2.5 kilograms that this scale is registering, so that's 5.5 pounds or almost 25 newtons. This blower puts out so much force that when I was doing the turbo tests, I taped down the turbo button and let it go, and I wasn't expecting it to, but it shot across my garage. There was no wheels or anything underneath it. It was just enough blowing force that it can move itself. Now, one thing to note that's really interesting, with bigger batteries than the 4 amp hour or the 5 amp hour, if you add another set of cells to those, the 7.5 amp hour battery actually outputs more wind force when you use this blower with it. So that's something to note. It gets pretty heavy when you're using a bigger battery in this, but the sling helps offset that. And currently the 7.5 amp hour battery is the biggest one that I own. If I ever end up getting one bigger than that, I'll do an update in the comments below so you can see if you get even more performance out of a 10 amp hour or a 12 amp hour battery. Now, this blower is pretty pricey. It's bare tool $269, or you can get the kit for $399 that comes with 2 4 amp hour batteries and a charger. I would highly recommend you get the kit. I'll put a link in the video description below. That's what I did. I bought this for $399. And I have a lot of Ego batteries, but it's always great to have spares and extras in case you don't want to run out of charge if you're doing a lot of work. And in this case, 2 more batteries for $130 was a no-brainer. Those batteries go for $250 just by themselves. So if you just wanted 2 4-amp-hour batteries, it makes more sense and you save $100 to buy this entire kit than the batteries individually. That's just the way Ego prices their tools. A lot of the times it's like that, but in this case, it is an exceptional value to get the batteries as well. Most kits aren't that extra value added. So overall, I think this is a fantastic blower. It is awesome at what it does. It is very powerful. I don't really know if I'd want much more power in a handheld blower because it's almost too much to handle.